The conference room felt too small, too cold, too full of judging eyes. I sat at the long mahogany table, hands folded in my lap, trying to look calm while my heart hammered against my ribs. Around me sat aunts, uncles, cousins, my father's entire family, gathered for the reading of his will. My mother, Janice, sat across from me, perfectly composed in her black dress, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. That's when I heard her whisper to my Aunt Rose. "I'm worried about Clara. She's been so unstable lately. I don't think she can handle financial decisions right now." Her voice was low but deliberately loud enough to carry. Aunt Rose's eyes widened, darting toward me with new suspicion. My stomach dropped. Around the table, heads turned. Uncle Marcus frowned. Cousin Debbie whispered something to her husband. The word unstable hung in the air like smoke, poisoning every breath. My mother had just framed me as incompetent before I'd even spoken. Mr. Chin, the family lawyer, cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. "If everyone's ready, we'll begin reviewing the estate documents." He opened a thick folder, and I gripped my own folder tighter under the table. The next few minutes would define everything. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My father had died 3 months ago, suddenly, unexpectedly, leaving a complicated estate and a family full of opinions. And now my own mother was sabotaging me in front of everyone who mattered. Unstable. The word echoed in my head. It wasn't the first time she'd used it. For years, she'd whispered similar things. Clara's too emotional. Clara doesn't think clearly. Clara needs guidance. Every time I disagreed with her, every time I questioned her decisions, I became unstable. But this was different. This was public character assassination, timed perfectly to undermine my credibility right before legal decisions were made about my father's estate. I looked at her across the table, and she met my eyes with a slight smile. Satisfied. Confident. She thought she'd won before the game even started. She thought I'd crumble under the weight of her accusations, that I'd stay quiet like I always had, accepting whatever scraps she decided to throw my way. But Janice had underestimated me. Badly. Because unlike every other family gathering, every other confrontation where I'd backed down, this time I'd come prepared. Very prepared. The relatives who'd heard my mother's whisper were already casting suspicious glances my way. Aunt Rose leaned toward Uncle Marcus, murmuring something behind her hand. He nodded slowly, his expression shifting from neutral to concerned as he looked at me. Cousin Debbie, who'd always been close to my mother, gave me a pitying look, the kind you'd give someone who couldn't be trusted with sharp objects. My younger cousin Tim, barely 18, just looked confused by the sudden tension. I realized with cold clarity that my mother had been planting seeds for weeks, maybe months. This whisper wasn't isolated. It was the culmination of a carefully orchestrated campaign to paint me as incompetent, unstable, incapable of managing my own inheritance. She'd probably called each of them privately, expressing her concerns about my mental state. Mentioning how I'd been struggling since Dad died. Suggesting that I wasn't thinking clearly, that I needed protection from myself. And they'd believed her, because mothers don't lie about their own daughters, right? Wrong. My mother was a master manipulator, and she'd been undermining me my entire life. But today, in this room, with legal documents about to be read, her manipulation would finally be exposed. Mr. Chin began reading the first document. Last will and testament of Robert Chin, dated March 15th of this year. My father's voice seemed to echo through the legal language, careful, precise, loving. He divided the estate thoughtfully, the house to my mother, investments split between family members, and specific trusts for his grandchildren. Then came the section about the family business, a successful import company my father had built over 30 years. Controlling interest in Chin Imports shall be held jointly by Janice Chin and Clara Chin, with the following provisions. Mr. Chin paused, adjusting his glasses. I leaned forward slightly, listening carefully. My mother straightened in her chair. This was the part she'd been waiting for, the part she'd tried to manipulate before Dad's death. I'd heard their arguments through bedroom walls, her voice insisting I was too young and too inexperienced to have any real say. But as Mr. Chin continued reading, I noticed something. A clause about financial competency reviews. A requirement for transparent accounting. Provisions that would require both trustees to demonstrate capability. My father had built-in protections, checkpoints, safeguards. He'd known. Somehow, he'd known this moment might come. "Excuse me, Mr. Chen," I said quietly, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Could you clarify Section 4.2? The part about competency standards?" The room went silent. My mother's eyes narrowed. Mr. Chen looked up, slightly surprised. "Of course. Section 4.2 requires both trustees to maintain transparent financial records and demonstrate ongoing competency in business management. Failure to meet these standards could result in removal from trustee position." He spoke matter-of-factly, but I saw understanding dawn in his eyes. My mother shifted uncomfortably. "Well, obviously both of us meet those standards," she said quickly, her voice light. "Robert just wanted proper documentation. Standard legal procedure." She waved her hand dismissively, trying to regain control of the narrative. "Actually," I said, louder now, opening my folder, "I'd like to present documentation regarding those standards." Since Mother mentioned concerns about my stability, I thought it best to address them directly. The room's energy shifted. Aunt Rose's eyes widened. Uncle Marcus leaned forward with interest. Janice's face paled slightly, her composed mask slipping. She hadn't expected me to speak up. Hadn't expected me to challenge her publicly. For the first time, I saw uncertainty flicker across her features. And it felt powerful. I pulled out neatly organized documents from my folder. Bank statements. Financial reports. Letters from financial advisors. Psychiatric evaluations from a licensed therapist. Every piece of paper was color-coded, labeled, professionally prepared. I'd spent weeks assembling this evidence, anticipating exactly this moment. "These are my personal financial records from the past 5 years, I began, my voice calm and clear. "As you can see, I've maintained consistent savings, responsible credit usage, and diversified investments. I've managed my own portfolio with a 12% average annual return." I passed copies around the table. Faces that had looked at me with suspicion moments ago now showed surprise, even respect. I continued, "I've also included a letter from Dr. Patricia Wong, a licensed psychiatrist I've been seeing since Dad's death. She confirms I'm mentally sound, processing grief appropriately, and fully capable of making complex decisions." The silence in the room was deafening. My mother sat frozen, her tissue clutched in her hand, her mouth slightly open. She'd built her attack on the assumption I'd have no defense, that family would take her word over mine. She'd never imagined I'd come armed with proof. Mr. Chen took the documents, reviewing them carefully. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "These are very thorough, Ms. Chen." Aunt Rose was the first to break the silence. "Clara, I had no idea you were so organized. This is impressive." Her voice carried genuine surprise, and maybe a hint of apology. Uncle Marcus nodded slowly, studying the financial reports with new respect. Cousin Debbie looked uncomfortable, glancing between me and my mother. The narrative she'd been fed was crumbling in real time. Even Yun Tim seemed impressed, whispering to his mother about my investment returns. My mother's face was tight, her jaw clenched. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. "Well, of course Clara's capable in some areas. I never said she wasn't. I just meant, she was scrambling, trying to backtrack, but the damage to her credibility was already done." "You said I was unstable," I interrupted quietly but firmly. "You suggested I couldn't handle financial decisions. But as this documentation shows, I've been handling complex financial decisions quite successfully for years. Without any help or guidance from you." The last sentence hung heavy. Several relatives shifted uncomfortably. Because everyone in this room knew that my mother loved to take credit for my accomplishments while simultaneously undermining my confidence. They'd seen it at family gatherings for years but had never acknowledged it openly. Now, it was impossible to ignore. Sitting there, surrounded by family and legal documents, I felt years of suppressed emotion bubbling up. My mother had spent my entire life dismissing me. In small ways and large ones. Telling relatives I was difficult when I disagreed with her. Suggesting I was confused when I had different opinions. Framing my independence as instability. When I'd gotten my MBA, she'd told people I'd barely passed, when actually I'd graduated with honors. When I'd bought my own apartment, she'd suggested to family that I'd needed her financial help, when I'd done it entirely on my own. Every achievement was either diminished or claimed as partly hers. And when I'd tried to be involved in Dad's business decisions before he died, she convinced him I was too emotional to handle the stress. Never mind that I had a business degree and years of corporate experience. Never mind that I'd offered detailed strategic plans. She'd poisoned that well too. But Dad must have seen through her eventually. These legal protections, these competency clauses, he'd built them in knowing that Janice would try exactly what she was attempting now. He'd given me the tools to defend myself. And I was finally using them. Mr. Chin continued reading. Section 7.3 states that Clara Chin shall have primary decision-making authority over strategic business directions, subject to financial review by both trustees. He paused, looking at my mother. This effectively gives Clara control over company operations, Mrs. Chin. The room erupted in murmurs. My mother's face went from pale to red. That can't be right. Robert and I discussed this. He agreed I should have final say because of my experience. She was speaking quickly, desperately. Actually, Mother, I said, pulling out another document, I have the notes from your last meeting with Dad and his lawyer. Mr. Chin can confirm, you tried to have my name removed from the company trusts entirely. You suggested Dad was being too generous with my inheritance. I slid the document to Mr. Chin. He reviewed it, nodding. Yes, Mrs. Chin, I remember this meeting. You requested significant changes to Mr. Chen's estate plan. He declined those requests. His tone was professional but pointed. Janice's hands trembled slightly. Around the table, family members exchanged shocked looks. She'd been exposed trying to cut me out completely, and now her claims about concern for my well-being looked like exactly what they were, manipulation for personal gain. I also have bank statements showing some concerning patterns, I continued, my voice steady. I passed around another set of documents. Over the past 2 years, Mother withdrew significant amounts from the company accounts for consulting fees and business expenses that can't be properly accounted for. Uncle Marcus took the statements, his frown deepening. Janice, is this accurate? These amounts are substantial. He looked up at my mother, his tone shifting from casual to serious. He'd been the company's accountant before retirement, he knew what proper books looked like. My mother's face was now completely flushed. Those were legitimate expenses. Robert approved all of them. But her voice lacked conviction. Mr. Chin was already pulling out corresponding company records, comparing them to my documentation. Mrs. Chin, he said carefully, these withdrawals don't match the expense reports filed with the company. There are significant discrepancies. The words were diplomatic, but the meaning was clear. My mother had been taking money improperly, possibly illegally. Aunt Rose gasped softly. Cousin Debbie looked horrified. The family members who'd been ready to side with Janice were now seeing her in an entirely different light. The woman who'd called me unstable had been systematically stealing from the family business. Based on this evidence, Mr. Chen said slowly, and per the provisions in Section 4.2 regarding financial transparency and competency, I must recommend that Clara Chen be granted provisional sole control of the business operations pending a full audit. Victory washed over me, quiet but profound. My mother started to protest, but Mr. Chen held up his hand. Mrs. Chen, you'll retain your financial interest in the company, but operational decisions will require Clara's approval. This is what your husband's will stipulates when competency standards aren't met. The words hit Janice like a physical blow. She slumped in her chair, her perfect composure finally cracking. I'd just been handed control of the family business, the business she'd tried to take entirely for herself. The business she'd used as a piggy bank while calling me unstable. Uncle Marcus cleared his throat. Clara, I owe you an apology. I should have asked questions instead of just accepting what I was told. His voice was gruff but sincere. Around the table, other family members nodded, murmuring similar sentiments. I nodded graciously, but inside I was celebrating. Not because I'd hurt my mother, but because I'd finally stood up to her. Finally proven that her manipulation wouldn't work anymore. Finally shown everyone who I really was. There's one more thing, I said quietly, pulling out a final document. My hands were steady now, confidence flowing through me. 6 months ago, Mother tried to have me removed from Dad's medical decision-making. She told his doctors I was emotionally unstable and couldn't be trusted. I passed around the hospital records. As you can see, the doctors rejected her request after meeting with me. They noted that I was calm, rational, and fully capable of participating in care decisions. They also noted concerns about Mother's attempts to exclude me from Dad's care. Janice stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly. This is ridiculous. You're twisting everything. I was trying to protect you from difficult decisions. Her voice was shrill, desperate. But everyone could see the truth now. She'd been trying to isolate Dad from me, to control his final months completely. Sit down, Janice, Uncle Marcus said firmly. Let's hear everything. His tone had shifted from neutral family member to disappointed authority figure. My mother slowly sank back into her chair, her eyes glittering with tears, whether from rage or genuine emotion, I couldn't tell. Mr. Chen made notes, his expression grave. The legal implications were becoming clear to everyone. This wasn't just family drama. This was potential elder abuse, financial misconduct, and systematic manipulation. The tide had completely turned. Relatives who'd looked at me with suspicion now looked at me with respect, even admiration. Aunt Rose reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Your father would be proud of how you've handled this, she whispered. Cousin Tim, the youngest in the room, spoke up. Clara, I'm sorry I believed what I heard. You've been really brave today. His earnestness was touching. Around the table, others echoed similar sentiments, apologies for doubting me, praise for my preparation, disbelief that Janice had been so manipulative. My mother sat silently now, her tissue shredded in her lap, her carefully constructed narrative in ruins. She'd come to this meeting expecting to sideline me completely, to take control of everything while positioning herself as the responsible one protecting her unstable daughter. Instead, she'd been exposed as the manipulator she was. Her financial misconduct was documented. Her attempts to exclude me from Dad's life were recorded. Her lies about my mental state were disproven with professional evaluations. Mr. Chen announced a 15-minute break. As people stood, several relatives approached me, expressing support, asking questions about the business, treating me as the competent professional I was. My mother remained seated, alone, untouchable. During the break, I stood by the window, looking out at the city below. I didn't gloat or celebrate publicly. I just felt relieved. Years of suppressed frustration, of being dismissed and diminished, were finally acknowledged. The truth was out. I watched my mother in the reflection of the window. She was on her phone, probably calling her sister, trying to spin this disaster. But there was no spinning documented evidence. No narrative she could construct would erase what had been revealed in that room. Uncle Marcus approached me. "Clara, I want you to know, if you need help with the business transition, I'm here. Your father was my brother, and I owe it to him to support you." His offer was genuine, and I appreciated it deeply. "Thank you," I said. "I'll take you up on that. Dad spoke highly of your business sense." He nodded, then said quietly, "I should have seen what she was doing. The signs were there. I just didn't want to believe a mother would," he trailed off, shaking his head. "She's very convincing," I said softly. "She's had years of practice." And that was true. Janice was skilled at manipulation, at playing the concerned mother while systematically undermining me behind the scenes. After the break, as people filed back in, my mother approached me. Her face was tight, her voice low. "You think you've won. But family will always remember you embarrassed your mother publicly. They'll resent you for it." I met her eyes steadily. "No, Mother. They'll remember you lied about me, stole from the family business, and tried to cut me out of Dad's life in his final months. Your manipulation won't work anymore." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. "You have no idea how to run that company. You'll fail, and when you do, you'll come begging for my help." Her confidence was shocking given what had just happened. "I won't fail," I said calmly. "But even if I do, I'll fail on my own terms. Not under your control, not following your manipulations, not carrying the weight of your lies. I'm done being your scapegoat." She opened her mouth to respond, but Mr. Chin called the meeting back to order. Janice returned to her seat, her mask of composure firmly back in place. But I'd seen the crack underneath, the desperation, the fear of losing control. Good. Let her feel what I'd felt for years. As the meeting continued, other family members began openly supporting me. Cousin Debbie, who'd been close to my mother, approached Mr. Chin. "I'd like it noted that I support Clara's position. Based on what we've seen today, she's clearly the right person to lead the business." Others echoed similar sentiments. Aunt Rose, Uncle Marcus, even Tim's mother, they were all vocally backing me. My mother's influence, built over decades, was crumbling in a single afternoon. Without her carefully constructed narrative, people were seeing reality clearly. Mr. Chin noted each statement of support. "This is quite unusual," he observed, "but given the circumstances, it's important to document family consensus." He looked at my mother. "Mrs. Chen, do you wish to contest any of these findings?" Janice's jaw worked, but she finally said, "No. But I want it noted that I believe this is a mistake. Clara is still young, still learning, she was trying one last time to plant seeds of doubt." "Mother," I interrupted gently but firmly, "I'm 32 years old with an MBA and 8 years of corporate experience. I'm not still learning. I'm capable. And I'm done apologizing for being capable. There's additional documentation you should see," I said, pulling out yet another folder. I'd saved this for later, timing the reveal carefully. These are communications between Mother and the company's former CFO, discussing ways to redirect company profits. Mr. Chin took the documents, his eyebrows rising as he read. Around the table, relatives leaned in, trying to see. Uncle Marcus took a copy, his face darkening with each page. "Janice, you were planning to sell company assets? Behind Robert's back?" The room exploded in shocked murmurs. My mother's face went white. "That's taken out of context. We were just exploring options," but her voice was weak, unconvincing. "These emails are very clear, Mrs. Chen," Mr. Chen said gravely. "You were negotiating to sell the company's warehouse property without informing your husband or the board. The proceeds were to go into an account solely in your name. The revelation was devastating. This wasn't just financial misconduct, this was betrayal of my father, attempted theft of family assets, systematic deception. Janice had been planning to strip the company and pocket the money, all while calling me unstable. Aunt Rose looked at her sister-in-law with disgust. How could you, Janice? Robert trusted you. Mr. Chen's expression was stern now. Mrs. Chen, these communications represent clear violations of your fiduciary duty as a trustee. Under the law, and under the provisions of your husband's will, I'm obligated to recommend your removal from all trustee positions. The words hung in the air like thunder. My mother's face crumbled. You can't do that. Robert wanted me involved. I was his wife, her voice broke, but now the tears seemed more about losing control than genuine grief. Your husband also included provisions for exactly this situation, Mr. Chen continued. He stipulated that any trustee found to be acting against the estate's interests could be removed. Clara, you have the authority to approve this removal. Every eye turned to me. This was the moment. I could be merciful, could allow my mother to save some face, could take the high road and keep her minimally involved. Or I could do what needed to be done, remove her completely, protect the business and family assets from further manipulation. I thought of my father, how hard he'd worked to build the company. How he'd hoped it would support the family for generations. How he'd trusted Janice, only to be betrayed in his final months. I thought of all the times she'd called me unstable, all the lies she'd told, all the damage she'd done. I approve the removal, I said quietly but clearly. Mother has demonstrated she can't be trusted with fiduciary responsibility. She should retain her financial interest as Dad's widow, but she should have no operational or decision-making role. My mother made a strangled sound. Aunt Rose nodded approvingly. Uncle Marcus said, "That's fair, Clara." More than fair, actually. Around the table, family members murmured agreement. But then I did something unexpected. I looked at my mother directly, my voice softening slightly. Mother, for years you've called me unstable, emotional, incapable. You've undermined every achievement, dismissed every success, poisoned relationships between me and family members. Her eyes welled with tears, real ones this time. You did all of this because you were afraid. Afraid that if I was seen as competent, you'd lose your position as the family matriarch. Afraid that Dad might trust me over you. Afraid that you'd become irrelevant. The room was silent. I continued, but your fear doesn't excuse your behavior. It doesn't justify the lies, the theft, the manipulation. And it certainly doesn't mean I'm going to continue enabling it. My mother's face was a mask of pain and rage and shame. She'd been completely exposed, emotionally and legally. And she knew she'd done it to herself. Mr. Chen finalized the paperwork. Clara Chen will assume full operational control of Chen Imports, effective immediately. Janice Chen's trustee powers are revoked. A full financial audit will be conducted, and any discrepancies will be addressed through appropriate legal channels. It was over. I'd won. Not through manipulation or lies, but through preparation, documentation, and truth. The company was mine to lead. The family saw me for who I really was. My mother's power over me was broken. As people prepared to leave, several relatives approached with offers of support. If you need anything, Aunt Rose said, advice, connections, just someone to listen, call me. Uncle Marcus handed me his card. Let's schedule lunch next week. We should discuss the business transition. Even Cousin Debbie, sheepish and apologetic, offered help. I work in marketing. If you need any promotional strategy work. I accepted all their offers graciously. These were bridges I'd rebuild, relationships I'd nurture. My mother sat alone, staring at the table. Part of me felt sad for her. She'd destroyed her own credibility, isolated herself from family, lost everything she tried to steal. But mostly, I felt relief. The woman who'd spent my life diminishing me could no longer hurt me. Over the following weeks, word of the meeting spread through our extended family and social circle. People who'd heard Janice's whispered concerns about my instability now heard the truth about her financial misconduct, her manipulation, her systematic attempts to undermine me. My mother's reputation, built carefully over decades, collapsed completely. Friends who'd sympathized with her difficult daughter now saw her differently. Business associates who'd worked with my parents heard about the documented theft. The community that had known our family for years learned the truth. Meanwhile, I threw myself into the business. Uncle Marcus helped me understand the operational details Dad had handled. Aunt Rose introduced me to key industry contacts. I hired a new CFO to clean up the financial mess my mother had created and implement transparent accounting systems. The company began stabilizing under my leadership. Employees who'd been nervous about the transition saw my competence and commitment. Clients who'd worked with Dad for years met with me and came away impressed. Within 2 months, we'd not only maintained operations but improved them. My mother watched from the sidelines, her financial interest intact but her influence gone. She tried a few times to offer advice, to criticize my decisions, to suggest I was in over my head. I ignored her completely. Her opinion no longer mattered. 6 months after the meeting, my mother made one last attempt at manipulation. She called a family dinner, ostensibly to heal relationships, but really to try regaining influence. I attended, curious to see what she'd try. She started with an apology speech, carefully worded, minimizing her actions while positioning herself as someone who'd made mistakes but only wanted what was best. She suggested that family unity required forgiveness and moving forward. But I'd documented everything from that meeting. I'd kept copies of all her communications, all the financial records, all the legal findings. When she tried to rewrite history, suggesting the issues had been exaggerated or misunderstood, I calmly pulled out my phone. Would you like me to read the exact emails where you planned to sell company assets and hide the money? Or perhaps the text messages where you told Aunt Rose I was having a mental breakdown? My voice was quiet but firm. The table went silent. My mother's face flushed. She'd been caught trying to manipulate again, and this time no one was buying it. Uncle Marcus shook his head. Janice, just stop. We know what you did. Apologize genuinely or don't apologize at all. She left early, and the rest of us had a pleasant evening. A year after that devastating meeting, I sat in my office, Dad's old office, which I'd redecorated but kept his favorite chair, reflecting on everything that had happened. The company was thriving. Employees respected me. The family had rebuilt trust with me at its center, not my mother. I'd proven that the label unstable was nothing but projection. My mother, who'd accused me of emotional instability, had been the one acting irrationally, stealing, lying, manipulating. I'd been calm, prepared, strategic, everything she'd claimed I wasn't. The journey had been painful. Confronting my mother publicly, exposing her misconduct, watching her lose everything she'd tried to steal, none of it had been satisfying in the way I'd imagined. But it had been necessary. Sometimes love means setting boundaries. Sometimes family means telling the truth even when it hurts. I'd learned that competence is the best response to false accusations. That documentation beats manipulation. That truth, however difficult, is more powerful than comfortable lies. My father had known this, had built legal protections anticipating exactly what happened. He'd trusted me to be strong enough to use them. And I had been. I'd stood up to the person I'd feared most, armed with nothing but truth and preparation. And I'd won. I established clear boundaries moving forward. My mother was welcome at family gatherings as Dad's widow, as my mother, but she had no say in business decisions. She received her financial distributions quarterly but couldn't access accounts or make decisions. Every interaction was documented, every conversation recorded if it involved business matters. She tested these boundaries occasionally, trying to offer unsolicited advice, attempting to criticize my decisions, suggesting I was making mistakes. Each time, I shut it down immediately. Mother, that's not your concern anymore. simple, firm, non-negotiable. The family adapted to this new dynamic. My leadership was accepted, even celebrated. Aunt Rose often said, "Your father would be so proud of how you've grown the company." Uncle Marcus bragged about my business acumen to his friends. Even Cousin Tim, now in college, talked about interning with Clara's company someday. My mother remained on the periphery, diminished but present. Some family members pitied her. Others felt she'd gotten what she deserved. I felt neither pity nor satisfaction, just a quiet certainty that I'd done what was right, what was necessary. The rules were clear now. Respect was mandatory. Honesty was required. Manipulation would not be tolerated. These weren't suggestions. They were the foundation of any relationship with me moving forward. Today, 3 years after that meeting, I run Chin Imports successfully. The company has expanded into new markets, doubled its revenue, and earned industry recognition. I've proven my competence beyond any doubt, not to convince my mother, but because I genuinely am capable. The word unstable feels like a distant memory, a weapon that once hurt me but lost all power when exposed to light. I don't think about it anymore, don't defend against it, don't let it shape my self-image. I know who I am, and that knowledge is unshakable. My mother and I maintain a cordial distance. We see each other at holidays, exchange pleasantries, keep conversations surface level. The relationship will never be what it could have been, but I've made peace with that. Some damage can't be repaired, only managed. Recently, a young woman reached out to me, a friend's daughter dealing with a manipulative parent. She asked how I'd found the strength to stand up to my mother. I thought carefully before answering. Document everything. Trust yourself. Remember that people who truly love you don't systematically undermine you. I paused. And know that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all, it's simply being so undeniably competent that their lies become obviously absurd. She thanked me, eyes bright with hope. And I realized that my story, painful as it had been, could help others. That by refusing to accept the unstable label, by fighting back with truth and preparation, I'd created a blueprint for others trapped in similar situations. My mother had tried to destroy my credibility. Instead, she'd forced me to document and prove my competence so thoroughly that no one could ever doubt it again. She'd tried to make me small. Instead, she'd pushed me to become larger, stronger, more capable than I'd ever imagined. Sometimes the people who try to break you end up being the ones who make you unbreakable. My mother gave me that gift, though she never intended to. And for that, only that, I'm grateful.